You are now listening to 1-900 Old Ladies, The Lost Art of Making Lefse, written by Ellie Starr, narrated by the author. Post-production by Pinto Media. Chapter 9. 2 hours after she received a call from Sheriff Paul Baker, Margie Carter had squeezed all of her remaining possessions into the trunk and back seat of her baby blue Lincoln Town car. She weeded out most of the outfits in her closet and donated them to her dress-up playmates, after deciding that they wouldn't fit in her trunk. These donated items included several pairs of peep-toed heels and sandals, her bright pink feather boa, 3 sets of hats, and various sequined purses, skirts, and dresses, all of which Lisa and Rachel wore in multiple layers while they stood to bid Margie a bon voyage. "Where are you going, Miss Margie?" Lisa asked. Margie knelt down and took hold of Lisa's small hand. "Well," she explained, "you know when your mommy doesn't want to do something for you and she says she'll do it when hell freezes over?" Lisa nodded. "Well, that's where I'm headed." Margie kissed Lisa on the cheek and gently tapped her nose. "I'm going to go take care of my little sister." Rachel handed Marge a worn and dirty pound puppy. An ear had been torn off, and his stuffing had been shoved back in. A rusty safety pin secured the seam in place. "Here, Mrs. Carter, Rover can take care of you." "Oh." Touched, Margie choked back her tears and hugged little Rachel. "I'm going to miss you girls." She stood to bid the girls a final farewell. "Once you girls grow into those shoes, you are so going to knock some little boy's socks off." She then turned and marched to her town car. She opened the driver's side door and yelled, "Turn left at Champaign." She positioned Rover face forward in the passenger seat, started the engine, and spun her tires out in the red Florida clay. While she drove off, Rachel and Lisa waved goodbye and clumsily shuffled home in their oversized shoes. Rachel held a newly acquired gold sequin purse, and Lisa now sported a hot pink feather boa. Sheriff Baker stuck his head into Ellen Sievertson's hospital room and knocked lightly on the door jamb. Ellie sat upright in her hospital bed watching television. Her arm was still hooked to an IV, but she was obviously feeling better and seemed to be in good spirits. She was now well enough to be discharged. The fragrant smell of flowers permeated the room. She was surrounded by at least a dozen get-well bouquets sent from former students, various Himmel neighbors, and fellow church members at Himmel Lutheran. At the center of Ellen's nightstand stood a gorgeous bouquet of 24 yellow roses. Attached to the arrangement was a simple handwritten card. "Get well soon, Miss Ellie. Love, William Knutson." "Miss Sievertson, you're awake?" Paul asked. Ellen grinned. "Oh my! Hello, Paul, dear." Paul stepped into the doorway. "You're looking very well these days, Miss Sievertson. It looks like you got your color back." "Why, thanks, hon. You know, I'm so grateful to you and William both." "Miss Sievertson, I brought you a surprise. Somebody's here to visit." He coached Margie into the room. Surprised, Ellen bounced up and down in her hospital bed. She immediately recognized her sister. "Oh, my goodness!" she cried ecstatically. "Aren't you just a sight for sore eyes?" Ellen and Margie talked on the phone regularly, but Ellen hadn't seen her older sister in person in over 10 years. Margie stepped over to Ellie's bed. She grabbed her hands, leaned over, and puckered her lips. "How are you, lass?" she inquired, and with the customary greeting she reserved only for her little sister and her 2 daughters, she pressed her cheek to either side of Ellen's face, loudly smacking her lips in the air. "Land sakes, I'm just beside myself," Ellie exclaimed. "What brings you here, Marge?" "Well, apparently someone has been reading your mail," Margie answered. She mischievously winked at Paul. Sheriff Baker called me in Florida and asked if I would come look after you. Ellen commented worriedly, "Oh dear, I didn't mean to be a bother." "Don't be silly, Ellie dear. There's a lot more to the story. We'll talk later." Sensing that he might now be intruding on the sisters' reunion, Paul Baker excused himself. "Ladies, I will let you catch up. I have to get back to work now. Nice to finally meet you, Marge." Margie sat down at the edge of Ellen's bed and shook her sister's hands excitedly. She bit her lip as Paul exited the room. Her gaze was fixed on the lawman's rear end as he vanished down the hallway. "Ellie, honey, he's dreamy. Is he married?" Marge was, of course, referring to the sheriff. "Oh gosh, yes. He's married to Doris. They were both once my students. Plus, well, isn't he just a little young for you, Marge? I'm going to let you in on a little secret, sister. I've been super horny since I don't know when. I'm about ready to whore myself out for free just to get myself laid." "Land sakes, John's not even cool, dear. Don't you need some time to grieve?" Margie laughed loudly. "Hell no! I need a penis. I need me some action." She stood and quickly changed the topic. "I hear you're going to bust out of this joint today. Let's get all these posies together and load them into the town car." She leaned down to sniff the yellow roses William Knutson had sent. Who are these from?" she inquired. She pulled out the attached card. "Oh, heavens, Margie!" Ellie reached for the card in her sister's hand, trying unsuccessfully to snatch it away from her. Margie glanced down to read the card. "Ooh, it says, 'Love, William Knutson.'" She grinned devilishly and in a sing-songy voice began teasing Ellie. "Ellie and William up in a tree, Kissing." Embarrassed, Ellie gasped shyly, "Oh my gosh." When Ellen's admitting physician informed her that she might be ready to go home in a few days, she was filled with a sense of dread. She didn't entertain the idea of returning home to her farmhouse alone. Even after Paul Baker had the phone and power turned back on, she hated the idea of being there, all winter, all by herself. But Paul had the good sense to appeal to Margie and ask her to come to North Dakota to live with her sister. True, he had opened Marge's letter to Ellen and read her mail, but Ellen didn't mind in the least that her privacy had been violated. Thanks to Paul Baker's intrusions, she was not going to freeze, starve, or spend the winter alone. She now had her big sister with her to keep her company. The Sievertson sisters returned to Ellie's farmhouse after she had been released from the hospital. It was hard to believe that Ellen had been admitted just a week earlier, both malnourished and hypothermic. She was now home, re-energized, and comforted in the knowledge that her favorite sister would be staying there with her. The dilapidated farmhouse was now illuminated with electricity and heated by the warmth of the electric furnace. Ellen had made up Stanley's bed for Margie to use. She lovingly provided several layers of her handmade quilts in order to keep her sister warm in her new bed. Margie had no bedroom attire to speak of. She historically slept in the nude, but she didn't like the restrictiveness of clothing keeping her awake at night. Of course, that worked fine for Margie when she lived in South Florida, but that wouldn't work for her in North Dakota. And, despite the fact that Paul Baker had turned the power back on, it was still quite chilly in the bedroom. Margie donned a pair of sweatpants and t-shirt she had packed in her suitcase. These were the warmest items of clothing she owned. She needed to invest in some warmer winter garments. Margie readied herself for bed, but her teeth began chattering. "My feet are friggin' freezing. Can I borrow a pair of socks?" Ellen loaned her a thick pair of socks to keep her feet warm. Margie put them on, all the while still shivering. "Tell me why I came up to this frozen tundra again. She crawled under the covers. Ellie turned to ascend the stairs to her own bedroom. Margie cried out to her, "No! Wait, Ellie! I'm too cold! Come keep me warm!" "What?" "Come on, Marge," Ellie stated in disbelief. "Seriously, Ellie, I'm not kidding. I need your body heat." Ellen climbed under the quilts of Stanley's queen-sized bed and snuggled up to her sister, who still shivered. "Land's sakes, Margie, you think you had never lived in the cold the way you carry on." Margie laughed. After about a minute, she warmed up and her teeth stopped chattering. Exhausted, Ellen drifted off to sleep. "Ellie?" Margie whispered in the silence of the dark room. "Hmm?" Ellen answered sleepily. "You want a spoon?" Margie chuckled. Ellen chuckled too. "Oh my goodness, Margie, go to sleep.